for,
Can we do a phone, somebody just put a phone on to record this?
Okay.
so in fact, I was even wavering, and I talked to Julie about this already, just to make this a consent agenda item. I personally don't have any problems with this whatsoever, but I feel like because it's a zoning application, it's a recommendation that we should make sure that the public has a chance to testify. So if you want to go ahead and talk about it.
I swear Julie in, please. Please raise your right hands. State your names.
Julie Bullock.
Lori Watkins. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening is the truth?
I do. I'm here to talk about the architecture and things, and she's the landscape designer. So my part of it's actually a pretty small part of it. So basically, it's actually an open porch that we're adding on to the side of the house. The variance is because although the house faces Dawson, the front door faces Dawson, it's on the corner of Dawson and Dale. The lot was platted to Dale. So therefore, even though what we would consider our rear yard is where we're locating the pool, by Bexley standards, it's considered a side yard. So I consider it a bit of a technical variance. We developed these spaces in conjunction with each other because we wanted, the porch and the pool and all the landscaping to kind of coordinate together, which is why I submitted those plans with it, just so you could kind of, see the overall scope of the project. But the details on the porch are pretty much matching what is on the existing house. We did an addition to this home a few years ago along Dale, and cleaned up some things that had been done to the house previously that weren't quite as compatible with the architecture, and now we're just kind of continuing that process with this new porch to the east.
Would you like to go ahead and just present the landscape as part of it too, and then as we go around, we'll.
Sure. So the homeowner's looking to add a pool in the backyard. We consider the setbacks off of the side yard in the pool location. Materials will follow when we get into, well, whenever you guys want them, but we're looking at a concrete paver in a large pattern with a small gravel, compacted gravel area off of the porch. And they're showing the wide steps to come down. We're doing screening along the property line to help break it up from the neighbor's house. And then we're still leaving a fair amount of lawn so that the kids have a place to run around. So that's it.
Okay. Joanne, do you mind starting?
I'm actually suggesting this could be a consent agenda item, so I'm confident staff can handle any issues, but, so I don't have anything unless they involve the computer.
I concur with that.
Bill first, okay.
My only issue, just fairness for all applicants, is there a east exterior drawing to this? Is it in the set? I couldn't locate it in my set.
And east.
Right. So I always like to see what I approve. Yeah. So I just don't know what the end of the porch looks like.
So we do have that in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Because I don't do that.
I think I'm talking about the Dale facing elevation. Yeah, I saw it.
So,
Okay.
is it a gable that looks similar to the,
That is oh, you went the east elevation facing the
Yeah.
neighbor's
East
house.
facing, right.
Yeah, it's just the gable.
Yeah, I mean,
Is it a
in
similar
fairness,
gable?
huh? Do we have it? No. Okay. We're,
Yeah.
That is east.
east would be to the left.
that's north?
That's north
I think
on
it's,
screen.
East is the left.
it's this.
Yeah, so it's similar to the gable that exists on the
Yeah.
porch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, can you at least pass that around for us to take a quick approach?
It's like,
Hey, do you have any questions while we're?
Yes. And I'm gonna wait 1 second till I see this second drawing. Can you walk us through just, I know you've already done work on the house, it's a beautiful home. Can you just walk us through the materials that you're planning, starting with, it looks like concrete,
If I can get the
alternate for
drawing.
pavers?
Is there on there?
I think it's pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
but I wanna make sure we're all
Sure.
on record to make sure.
So we're basically matching what's on the house now with the, there's stucco details, there's a heavier fascia board, I think it's a 1x10, I believe. And some vertical boards and stucco panels. We're doing the simpler paneled column. There's both brick and paneled columns on the house. Probably a painted smooth grade hardy board or plywood panel with 1x wood trims.
It mimics the front. Correct. The gable mimics the front.
Yeah, everything matches the house. Including the roof pitch, et cetera.
Okay. Is there anyone who has anything in addition? Do I have someone that wants to make a motion on this?
Is there anybody else here?
Oh, I'm sorry, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this project? See none? I have to get the findings of fact.
Findings of fact and decision of the board for application number BZAP-21-33 for property located at 270 South Dawson. The board recommends design be approved by the Board of Zoning and Planning, subject to zoning approval for the open porch, side porch, and proposed swimming pool.
And we should note, the landscape plan, we have no jurisdiction over the landscape plan, so,
Right.
but that's nice to see the landscape plan.
And do we really comment on pools? Okay.
And the zoning board, they could certainly go
Yeah.
there.
So, do we have the recommended conditions in the findings? The staff's conditions that the landscape plan be reviewed, the final design be reviewed by the design consultant. We put that in.
Well, those are
Two
recommended
recommendations, and they can accept them? Yeah. Okay, so we will add recommendations of the final design review, subject to the design consultant and landscaping to the city landscape consultant.
That would be the condition.
Add our conditions.
Okay, so we just need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, Ms. Strasser?
Yes.
Mr. Holland?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Hyder?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your.
Thanks.
Okay, our last application is BZAP 21-36. The address is 210 East Broad Street. The applicant is Brett Foley. The owner is St. Charles Preparatory School. The applicant is seeking a review and recommendation to the Board of Zoning and Planning for a master plan to add Convocation Center, Learning Resource Center, Performing Arts Center, and additional parking.
Okay, before I hand it over to Brent, I'm going to give an introduction to what we're doing here. This application is it's really going to the Board of Zoning and Planning first to get approved as a master plan for St. Charles improvements to their main campus. When I say main campus, because there's a campus across the street too, so I want to make sure we're talking about the main campus on Broad as the entrance piece to that site. It is coming before you because we have learned, staff in the past, that it is a very good idea to share something with the Architecture Review Board, even if there's really not a decision for you to make at this point other than a general recommendation to move it on to the Board of Zoning and Planning. That's not to say that we don't want feedback, we do, and eventually this plan, this process, the buildings will have an enormous amount to do with this board. This board will be reviewing the individual buildings eventually. Right now, they're looking for a master plan so that they can sequence things and phase things and fundraise and then be back to us with a certainty that what they're doing is going to make a whole eventually. So we're looking at things like how program pieces relate to each other, where they are on the site, how they relate to Broad Street. You will see, and you've seen in the renderings, some implied building design. Some of it may very well come to fruition. Some of it may be designed completely different by the time we get to buildings later in the process. So I want to keep that in mind. I don't think it's unreasonable to make comments on building the implication of the design, but please just remember, this is a master plan review, not a building review. Did I give enough of an introduction?
That sounds great.
So, very much value your opinion. This is the first it's been seen, but you know that.
I would, sorry,
Sorry, please state your name.
Brett Foley.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening is the truth?
I do. Thank you very much. I would say that we, of course, would welcome any comments because we would take that into consideration as we continue through the design process with the individual buildings. My name is Brent Foley. I'm a principal and partner with Triad Architects. I'm also a proud graduate of St. Charles, where I actually started my architecture career as an intern at Triad Architects a long time ago. Also a resident of Bexley, live in South Bexley. Moved here 2 years ago. Have become Mr. Hire was very happy to hear some of the things we're talking about. Loving the character of this community as an architect, and embrace this at my community. Recently joined the Bexley Education Foundation, and I'm happy to be a part of Bexley. With me today, I have Jim Lowry, principal from St. Charles, who I spent some time in his office when he was the dean of students at St. Charles when I was there. We also have with us Jim Negron, who is with Corn & Cozy, who has been doing construction at St. Charles as long as I've been out of St. Charles. And we also have Matt Ferris with us, who is the civil engineer who is prepared the plan that you see in front of you. They'll be here to answer any technical questions you might have on those components. What we're doing today is trying to give you the context of how we got to where we are, to understand that we are trying to take a faith-based school institution that's over 100 years old, that is a big part of the history of Bexley, a big part of the community of Bexley, trying to figure out how to celebrate that heritage while also be competitive in the marketplace with other schools and other communities, as well as prepare the students at St. Charles for 21st century learning. So the components of the project will include what we're calling a convocation center, which is also going to act as the gymnasium. That will be the primary use will be the gymnasium on that building. It will also hold some events. There is did the event occur already? The Eucharistic Ministry event? There's a Eucharistic Ministry event. There's a lot of Catholic events that happen in St. Charles and those types of things. The next project that we would be doing is actually what we're calling the Learning Resource Center. The intent of that is to provide new and innovative spaces that can provide new and innovative ways of learning. Also, a performing arts center. I'll describe each project here in a moment, but that will be basically making sure that we have facilities that are in line with the quality of the productions that are being produced at St. Charles. And lastly, there will be upgrades to what is kind of sacred space at St. Charles, which is the grotto area. We started this process in 2018, started planning this process. We also simultaneously started in 2018 a process that is finally underway, which was a addition for some parking that we needed to do, and we're actually doing that part right now. When we came here in 2018, we sat in this room with BZAP, and we understood, we learned at that time that our neighbors had some concerns about some of the work we were doing. So we've done a lot of work in the last 3 years to make sure that we understand what the neighbors' concerns are and that we are addressing the neighbors' concerns. And in fact, those things that we learned from them changed and influenced the design that we see in front of you today. I'll talk about that in a minute. Just to help illustrate some of the things we worked through with the neighbors, in the parking, east side parking addition that was recently approved and is under construction right now, we isolated all of the storm water that is going on in that parking lot. We're actually taking a new storm line across the front. If you go past St. Charles right now, you see big piles of dirt, and having our own dedicated storm line is making sure that none of the water on the east side of St. Charles is going onto the neighbors' properties at all. It's all being taken to Allen Creek from there. We also picked up one of the catch basins behind one of the neighbors to make sure that we're helping alleviate some of the issues in that area. We screened all the lighting that's on that side of the property to make sure that none of that light was polluting into their properties. We're providing landscape separation, which has been approved by by the Tree and Garden Commission to make sure that they, that it's a heavy, thick landscaping that will both screen the headlights as well as try to discourage people from going back and forth between the properties. Then we also reduced the size of that parking and brought the parking behind the front of the building, which was something that was part of the concern of the neighbors at that time. We're happy to say that that's resulted in a situation where our relationship with the neighborhood, or the neighbors over the last 3 years has really changed. In fact, we met with Mr. White and Mr. Rosenberger. We invited them to view this before we submitted it. And they came as representatives of the neighbors there on Meadow Park. And they indicated at that time that they support this plan and the direction we're going. So we're very happy about that history, and we're very happy to be in front of you. To walk you through the plan, so the main building, you can see Broad Street is on the south there. The main campus there says existing school. To the right of the main building is the chapel where we're building the parking lot right now. So that is the new drive and access to that east parking lot there. Behind the main building is a circle that you see as New Learning Resource Center. That is the location of the existing gym. That's the original gym at St. Charles. If you've ever been in there, there's not a lot of clearance around the gym. It doesn't meet current safety standards. It's not up to National Federation of High School sports standards. So the idea, the emphasis for replacement gym is about that. But we will have that space there. And so the idea would be to convert that to the Learning Resource Center. Originally, just to the right of that circle, there's a space there you see with the notch out of it. That's the existing locker room space. We were originally going to build the gym on top of the baseball diamond and have it flanked with classrooms around the perimeter on that east side. Obviously, our conversation with the neighbors along the way, we determined putting the building on that side was not probably a good idea if we wanted to be good neighbors. So, where you see the big octagonal building, which is the new convocation center, we moved it to that side, and we decided to try to keep our baseball facilities on campus. Where that is currently is a big parking lot. So that gives us a huge problem, or a design challenge, I should say, to figure out. So the only real place we have at that point then is to move and to create a parking addition on the south side, southwest side. So that's what's driving a lot of this. This is a campus that's full of a lot of buildings, full of a lot of uses already, and we're trying to figure out how to be most sensitive to the neighbors' needs, but fit everything on here in a way that works. We also recognize, as was mentioned, that St. Charles is kind of the gateway to Bexley along Broad Street as you're coming from downtown. So you'll notice, rather than making the drive of that new parking lot parallel to Broad Street, we've kind of taken it at an angle. The idea is that as you come in, that would open up and you would see views of the building of St. Charles and as a nice entrance into Bexley. We fully intend to screen that with landscaping. We know that we're going to have to go through an extensive process with the Tree and Garden Commission. We also have the advantage of the fact that that parking lot sits at grade quite a bit lower than Broad Street. So we can provide not only some mounding, but some actual drop in elevation to make sure that that parking is screened. And then the last component of the project is, you can see where it says Performing Arts Center. It's that building there with the two wings off of it. The intent is actually to take the existing building, modify it to increase the seating size, and perhaps provide some additional art-type classroom spaces. And you can see there's an addition between them to finally connect that building to the existing building, which will also allow us opportunity to provide accessibility to the theater. Currently, there's a chair lift that goes up inside the lobby that's not in the best condition. It probably isn't the best accessibility. If we build that addition, we can connect across to the existing building where there is an elevator and provide full handicap accessibility to that part of the building. So that's it in a nutshell. We'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, we welcome the feedback, and we'll certainly want that as we consider how we move forward with the design. There are some example renderings that are, they are a little squished, that are really just intended to show you how the buildings could fit within the space. Some of them are more developed than others. I don't want to commit to an order of the buildings at this point. We're still working through some of those things, but there is a likely order that we're working towards. So that's the area around the grotto that we will be creating. The first one you saw was the Learning Resource Center building. That is the Learning Resource Center behind the existing school, again with the Convocation Center, which is with the tile roof there, the piazza space kind of in the middle. And lastly, that's looking back. This does not have the Learning Resource Center in it, but looking back, the right portion is actually the existing Walter Commons, which I'm sure you've all attended. I know that's a space that's used for many events in Bexley. In fact, I think we have our Bexley Education Foundation signature events there, and I think hopefully next year we can maybe have it there. And this is looking back with the grotto on the left and the Convocation Center on the right. I believe the images you got, I think Karen sent ones that were proper, so you could have seen them in proper scale without the
And I think
squishing.
they're proper on the website.
Yeah.
Just something happens in translation. We're working on that in this platform.
Gotcha. And welcome any questions. If I'm slow to respond, I was up with a sick baby last night till 2 o'clock, so I apologize.
I did want to say one more thing, and then we just want to open it up for comments from the board. I was on the phone for a little bit with Jason Sudi, who you all know is our wonderful planner. He is not here tonight because he's out of town, but we actually thought that was better anyway, just to have you guys give your presentation. He will be doing a full report and presentation at the Board of Zoning and Planning this month. I would highly encourage all of you to either come, listen to it, or at least listen to it on YouTube, providing this doesn't happen again, because it won't be on YouTube. It won't happen again. But I think it's really important that, maybe I'm erring on the side of caution, because we have, unfortunately, as you know, have had times when it skipped this board, went to zoning first and came back here. And when the buildings come to you, I want to be sure that you are very well versed in the planning, discussion, Jason's report, the comments of the zoning board. I want it to be a very inclusive process so that we can move it as quickly as we can. I mean, not rush it, but not have to backtrack.
Yeah.
So I will make sure that I send out emails to all of you and remind you, but you certainly don't have to come here, but you're welcome to. But
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock. Not next Thursday, but the Thursday.
The 26th.
And if I could offer one more thing, if everything lines up the way we're intending, funding, budgeting, things we're working on, we would intend yet this fall to be back in front of you with the first building if we do get approval of the master plan. So.
It's exciting, and just to give you kind of like some insight into our staff discussion that we had at St. Charles with all of these wonderful people, that Jason really talked a lot about how the screening of the parking, but more importantly, the landscape on Broad Street as an entry piece really has to have a lot of attention paid to it. He, I don't want to speak for him, but he was less concerned about the additional parking towards the street and more concerned about how we read it.
Yeah, and I would state that the neighbors, loud and clear, on the record in this meeting and when we have met with them, are happy that we're not putting additional parking on the east side, and there really is no other location. And in fact, we have parking that BZAP can't consider ultimately because it's not in the city of Bexley that we've added in Columbus on the other side of Elm Creek. So we're doing everything we can to make sure we have as much parking as we can. We were underparked because we existed before the zoning code, so we're doing everything.
Okay. Are there board members that want to ask questions or speak?
I'd be happy to. Recognizing there's a fundraising is key, obviously.
Yeah.
And so in that, and obviously context and residents, we already know that. So maybe a couple of thoughts that are just maybe helpful on that front. Part of it, and take this as you will, part of this reads, of course, as an engineering drawing. It reads as a parking drawing. For example, there are code requirements about landscaping being integrated within parking areas, so that Bexley has that. So as a matter of a drawing, you may find it more important to make it a landscape drawing that has parking within it, as opposed to machine images of trees here and there on an engineering drawing. And a couple of thoughts on that line too. One, you might also have a drawing, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, but you might have another drawing that augments this, that shows your west campus, so that there's the totality of your property shown on at least one drawing. This could be a separate drawing. And in that light too, one wonders whether the pedestrian connection shouldn't be more announced as it comes across, and not just empty into a lot in any old place. It seems like there ought to be the ability to take that walkway and extend it across the backside of the Performing Arts Center and the lobby, so that it's a fully integrated pedestrian movement. They don't have to all of a sudden walk through the lot.
I see.
And a couple other little minor things. And this is just for future reference. Certainly when you're a school, athletics and recreation and green space is a program. And so therefore it's not just future building sites that can be consumed by buildings. It's because you take away those program elements for the students and and so so the loss of the front yard is that informal, there's always scrimmages out there. That's certainly a bit of a loss there. But to think that the baseball field could also kind of disappear without any possible replacement of where that could go, and therefore lose any athletic portion here other than walking across the bridge, which we need to make a better connection to. Something I think you want to think long and hard about as an institution, because once the green space is gone, it's gone.
To be clear, that was something we had been considering, but moving the building to the west side was in order to.
Right, no, I guess my point is, maybe it should have been considered in the first place, because it's, again, just because it's green space doesn't mean it's sitting there awaiting another building.
Sure.
Because it's a very important part of the institution. So those are just comments that I'd add. It's great to have you in Bexley, and hopefully, and then the landscape plan I think is going to be important. Oh, one other small issue. You might also look at that lower parking in terms of drive aisles as to how that parking unloads. Because, you'll have big events, you do have big events, and the bottom aisle there, parallel to Broad, coming through parking on its way out, one or two, three cars backing out and then that stop. I mean, just something to think about, how you're going to unload cars and having a distinctive aisle of some kind. And anytime you park directly off the main driveway, a car backing out stops the whole thing. So just something to think about how your flow works in terms of movement.
Appreciate those comments. Thank you.
I think this drawing that Larry's talking about, if you just colorized it, it would solve a lot of the issues.
We could
No.
certainly do that.
It's not just adding color, it's adding landscape.
Yeah, we're just not there yet.
It's not there.
No, I understand, but colorizing it would be a much easier thing for people who aren't used to reading plans.
True, but there's a code requirement for landscaping and parking lots, so you gotta at least show that.
Who would like to go next?
Sure. So as a master plan, I think if you were to ask me where's the best place to put an addition in the building, I think you got it right on. That parking lot, I think, was kind of a quirky pass-through parking lot. When there was nobody there, people were just going to drive through the middle. So I think this is an improvement in that when you're adding it to the building, that's the best spot for it. So I think you're right on the right track there, and I wouldn't have any criticism for that. I appreciate the efforts with the community. I think the efforts that the school has taken to remediate water and manage water is exceptional. I see that work, drive by it every day, and it's nice to see it's going in. And I will miss the football practices right there because of the parking. But we at big facilities you have big parking. So right across the street there's a big parking lot for Wolf Park. So I think that needs to be managed, and it sounds like you're going to be looking at that, and I think the public message is going to be the most important thing, putting that best foot forward. Landscape plans, I agree with having that kind of, obviously a colorized civil plan gets you to a point, but having a landscape architect, no offense to Eco Fairs, but so I think you're on track. I think I don't have any real criticism to the master plan. I think we could easily go through the squished images and talk about the architecture, but I know that's way premature. I think that the challenge you run into that is when those are shown publicly, people think that's what you're building.
Right.
So either you got to make them even more watercolor-y, kind of like abstract, or limit your exposure in that public message, because you're going to get a lot of people that love and hate the office tower look of the Learning Resource Center versus the traditional octagon building. So you've been there, you've done that. I would say control that message and make sure we're focusing on the things that need to be focused on until you come back to present that architecture.
We obviously face similar challenges with not just the public, but for fundraising efforts as well.
Of course,
People
right?
get
So
money to
it's-
something.
Yep, and it's a balancing act, and I think that's the challenge we all go through. So, but I think overall, looking at it just on the master plan side, obviously there's all sorts of the engineering aspect of it, and water management, and fire control, and access points. But I think overall, the flow and traffic, obviously we want to make sure there's no backing up issues and clogging of those arteries. But I think it's similar to what it is now. So I think that does flow and work well, and it kind of meanders around the building. I actually appreciate that that's maintained. So I don't have any other major concerns for the master plan.
I would add that EP Ferris has done the studies to make sure that the fire trucks can pass through the bus transfers.
I had this. Can I see those turning radiuses? No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hack?
I'm a proud father of a graduate, just graduated, and had a great time in St. Charles. It's not always fun getting through there with your car, but I found a way to do it and get out the back and get back to work just around the corner here. I didn't have to fight out with the Broad Street traffic, so that was good. The architect of the original buildings, Robert Kraus, is one of my favorites for ecclesiastical architecture in Columbus and the region. And I think it'd be really important that you look at his architecture in more detail, not just St. Charles, but St. Therese Retreat Center, and there's a
Out
whole
on Broad Street,
and there's a whole assortment of other churches he did, including St. Agatha in Upper Arlington, which is a phenomenal church, by the way. It's just this mid-century, incredible building. It's traditional and modern at the same time. It's a great building. He was a master at joining traditional forms and meanings with new materials, and St. Charles is a great example of that. The brickwork is incredible. The entryways, with the way that he did the bricks, is so traditional and yet very clean. Okay, and they have great proportion. And when you drive by on Broad Street, it's that proportion and it's that shape of architecture, that ecclesiastical shape or collegiate shape of architecture. Of course, collegiate architecture originates with ecclesiastical architecture, right? Oxford, Cambridge were monasteries. And so that front courtyard, has a meaning, right? You're leaving the world of the secular, you're going into the world of knowledge. Michelangelo, in his Laurentian library, he has you go up these stairs to the library because that is a plane of learning that's above our mundane world. This is a place of learning. It's not just a place of learning, it's a Catholic place of learning. So when I drive by and I look at the campus and I see the chapel, which is this appendage off to this, it's a gorgeous chapel, which I know can't fit all the students in it for masses, and that's a shame. But when I look at the campus, unlike the Josephinum, where I do a lot of work, which has that chapel front and center at the highest point, how do you get the message across in architecture that Christ is the center of this campus? How is that reflected in the organization of the buildings? Where's the hierarchy? Right? These are really important questions for a collegiate style campus, which is crammed in, I understand, on this lot, and it's very difficult to arrange. And so I guess what I'm saying is that you have a lot that kind of forces you to be very pragmatic. You have to be very attentive to the parking, the circulation of traffic, and I don't want you to lose sight of that overall meaning. As a parent, when I drive through there and I drive around and I want to be inspired, not just by the front facade and that beautiful Robert J. Krauss architecture. I want to see it everywhere. I don't want to see buildings that are just, well, we had to build this and it had to be this big and we wanted to throw in a couple of traditional details. I think it's important that you make sure that you incorporate Krauss as much as you can. The shapes of your buildings, I kind of get the convocation center because of the road and everything, but your educational building, there's nothing more non-pragmatic than a circle. For architecture, it just does not make sense. It's expensive to do curved glass. It's expensive to do curved curtain walls. The cost of that building could be cut in half by doing it as a rectangle or something else. And honestly, it's not the most important building on the site, but you're kind of making it that way by the expression of modernist architecture. Unlike George Berardi's original edition, what is the Walter Commons, right? That, to me, it does pay attention to the Krauss building. I think it's out of scale, that entryway. Where's the hierarchy? You have like 4 different buildings now that are all competing in hierarchy, right? You've got the Convocation Center, the Education Center, the Walter Commons, and the original cupola of the beautiful, I'll keep saying that, Robert J. Krauss building. So where is the hierarchy? And again, I understand that you have spaces you have to work with in terms of the size, how you fit them on the site. But just for inspiration, I would look at places like Yale, Oxford, the Josephinum, which is, you have, 3 men going there this fall? It's incredible. So, and then Courtyards. Courtyards are a major part of the atmosphere of, I would say, a traditional learning campus, Catholic learning campus. It's part of the identity. And I think that if you were able to incorporate more of that, like I see, and I know that Berardi, had that one cloister walk that's to the north of the entry to Walter Commons. And I see you turning the corner with it, but I'd want to see more in your master plan. This is very circulation oriented. Courtyards are places, they're destinations. They're outside rooms, right? And you have the ability here to do some beautiful courtyards, ideas of these outside rooms where students can gather. CSG has several courtyards on their campus and they're crammed in. And they're wonderful for graduations and convocations, whatever, where people go out and enjoy them. Here though, this little park in the middle of the traffic circulation, to me it's not, it's an island. And I think you could, by how you do your pavings and how you do a formalization of a courtyard that joins all of these buildings, just an idea, but you could really tie all this together with what I would call a 5th building, which would be some kind of outside space. And again, I know you've been dealing with having the circulation of cars and traffic and fire trucks and all that, but I want that to go back, to the origin of what this school is supposed to be doing. It was originally a pre-seminary, and the boys that go there love its traditions, they love its history, they love its architecture in the Krauss building. The other stuff is very pragmatic. I'd like to see that character come through more. And the scale of those details is really important. Krauss designed brick details down to the smallest little emblems, right, in the brickwork.
Yeah, you can see it all around
Yeah.
the premises, yeah.
Oh my gosh, you can spend all day just looking at how he incorporated, even on the current theater. It looks like a plain wall facing Broad Street, but when you go up to it, there's all kinds of brickwork that's in it. I wish if it was cleaned, and Tuck pointed, you probably see it even more, but just pay attention to the scale. You need to have that small scale because as a campus, you have people walking around and taking part in the buildings on the outside just as much as, well, maybe not as much as the inside, but you want them to engage with the buildings on the outside. And to do that, you have to have human scale details. So it's not just the big overall shapes, it's how you modulate that down to the smaller details. Just some ideas as you move forward, but definitely the boys love the original buildings. I've heard of all kinds of stories about, you know, the pranks that have been played in different parts of the original building. Mr. Lauer doesn't know anything about those. But, you know, the architecture is definitely a part. The pictures that you see of the boys, you know, in front of the traditional details here and there, entryways, cupola, you know, the front courtyard out facing Broad Street. That character, you have a chance to really extend that through.
I appreciate those comments, Bill, and in fact, I think this view is important because it's not quite there yet, and obviously this is eyewash, but you know, what the placements of the buildings does is create a sort of three-sided courtyard that now focuses on the grotto, right? And so there is an opportunity, you know, if you started to bring some of the archways and things around and looked at those types of things to create and frame that space in a different way, a better way. It doesn't feel like a grotto in the middle of the parking lot, which is, I think, what you're struggling with, right?
No, not really.
Okay.
The grotto, and you know, every campus has a grotto, Catholic campus has a grotto, and it's usually something that's off to the side somewhere. It's not a main focus. And maybe that would help shift some of your thinking, is if you realize that is not, there's no tradition of it being the main focus of a campus that I'm aware of. We're building one right now for the University of St. Francis at Fort Wayne, and it's, you know, it faces the main chapel, which is great, but it's kind of off across a little lake, and it's not a major focus. There is no path that goes directly to it. I would say your bigger thing here is how you organize these buildings, the hierarchy of the shapes. You know, do you really need a cupola on top of your convocation center? Are you competing with Krause's original? You know, Berardi has this very large, you know, gabled entry to Walter Commons, which you know, is already competing in some ways with the original, and so you're adding another element. I get the monumentality of the entryway to the Convocation Center, but when you come back with more designs on this, it'd be really nice to see how just those buildings are organized around something that can tie them together. Because in plan and in these images, I see sort of a sequence of buildings that are moving because of the site, the way it's arranged, and the best place to put those. But I don't see how, you know, this idea of collegiate or educational courtyards, and I'm not saying that it has to even be colonnaded, but maybe it's just paving that does it. But there's got to be, I think, something that pulls all those buildings together in a more visible way. I mean, that's just my.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joanna, can you follow that?
I'm not gonna follow that.
I've been out of college for a long time. That's the closest that I felt to a crib.
Same here.
So Robert J. Krause there was a book published by his son on his work, and there's no ISBN number or anything like that. I think he did it like, I don't know,
So
online or
kind of
something.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I have a copy, and I'd love to show it to you
I'd
sometime.
love to see it.
Yeah. I have it in my office. Yeah.
That one, see it too.
Yeah, and there are a number of other buildings in central Ohio that he did that are not in the book that I can tell you about.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, as he talks, I see that circular building starts, for me, since I looked at the image, it's the focal point, and when I hear you say that it shouldn't be, I totally agree with that.
What would you think, this maybe, Bill, you'd be part of this conversation too, but sometimes the strategy for that, one of the things we've talked about for the circular building, if you think about the way, the treatment of the John Hancock Tower in Boston, the way that it is reflective next to the Trinity Church and next to the post office, the library in that square there. it's an interesting way to apply a modern application in a way that what it does is it actually reflects the historic. However, in this instance, it wouldn't actually reflect anything that's actually historic.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not mirroring anything. I mean, no offense to, the Walter Commons, because I think they did a fairly sensitive, addition, but St. Charles being a traditional campus, I just don't see the place for that. On top of that, the Hancock building in Boston is a really bad example, honestly, because you know the history of that building.
With this hotel out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people were killed.
Yeah.
All glass curtain walls are very difficult to maintain. They can work as a contrast sometimes, but I would not recommend it for just for the maintenance costs. Brickwork and traditional detailing, especially on this campus, is going to give you many more years of, you're going to have 30 years between, maintenance on some of these if you do a nice job with the brickwork and less glass. A convocation center, do you really need a lot of glass? No. An education center, if it's rectangular or square, or whatever the shape, the amount of glass should be lessened, because I think you're just going to get better years out of it, and it's probably going to be aesthetically more pleasing. When people see a campus like Yale or Oxford, they might see different styles of buildings. I mean, I'm talking about the core campus. I'm not talking about the libraries and the sort of science buildings that you'll see on those campuses that tend to be modern and sort of iconic. But the core campus is a series of buildings that all relate to each other. They might have stylistic differences a little bit, but they respond with proportion. It's kind of like Bexley. They respond with, proportion of windows to massing of the walls, the heights. There are certain places where you create hierarchy with cupolas or dormers or whatever it is. This campus could become, the sort of educational version of what Bexley is, which is, it's unified, but it's diverse, and yet there's a respect for, those elements that are historic, and yet we can do things that are more contemporary here and there, but they can't.
And then circles, quite frankly, can't be laid out for educational spaces. There's no good way to subdivide circles to create educational spaces. Very, very hard.
And Columbus has a bad history with circular buildings.
Right.
If you remember the Christopher Hotel downtown.
Well,
you know,
Christopher, and then our famous hospital over here too, which doesn't work because no nurse can see down a hall, because the hall's always curving, so you can't tell what room somebody's needing. It's just functionally a disaster. So it may look like it's an interesting form, but it's a very difficult one to ever make sense out of that. And then, Milo, I think getting this grand tutorial on educational mastermind. But the other thing that's always interesting to do is to abstract out the outdoor pedestrian connections, the system, the walkway system, and then the main interior system, how it works, and to see the relationship between the two and whether there's a coherent system there. Because sometimes what happens when institutions are on their third or fourth or fifth or sixth edition, a lack of sensitivity to the hierarchy of the pedestrian space inside means something is really off the path. And it makes it very, very difficult to have a really clear functional campus. There's just a lot that goes into a master plan, an educational master plan. So appreciate the start here, that there's depending on how far you all want to, what you need to do for you. But those are just things for some of us that have been involved in this, doing this for 40 years, become pretty important. So you always want that next edition to not only solve its programmatic drivers, but also help unlock some other problem and solve some problem, but certainly not to add to it and further complicate the campus. So there you go.
Appreciate
I'm done.
Took your time, and actually, we went back to Bill and Larry, so I'm gonna make sure you have your opportunity.
Oh, no, I'm good. I appreciate you bringing it in front of us. It's very exciting. And I know that I didn't have a son that went there, but I did hear from his friends that these are the things that you need, that you really needed the educational centers, that the learning centers and all that, yeah, so.
Great.
It's great. I do have a question though, is the soccer field, is that already gone, or is it
It'll
going?
stay, it'll stay.
It'll stay,
Yeah.
okay.
So the soccer, football field, yeah, that's.
Yeah, it stays in there. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, the big emphasis for us is the next, as we get the master plan approved at PSAP, is we'll be getting our parking variances and all those types of things that move forward with confidence.
When you start finalizing some of your views, I would recommend that you stick with these are beautiful hand drawings. And they give a lot of character. If you go to computer and you try to render it, I'm sorry, but it's just not going to give the character. So, like when some of these buildings start coming back to us, it's just, they really are helpful at showing character without getting into us focusing on something that the computer didn't render right. You know what I mean? And you have that talent.
Like the colors of the roof shingles and the brick.
So you obviously have the talent to express what those materials and those colors and the feel is here. So I would continue that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
We
very much.
also, we can't have an official meeting, but we can share PDFs at any time, if you want.
Absolutely.
So Karen, are we making a recommendation into the PSAP at this time, or?
I don't know, I don't know that it's necessary, but if you all feel,
I don't think.
I don't think so, I think
We can certainly share comments.
Yeah.
I mean, I just appreciate the ability to have comment.
Thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, for other business, the only thing I want to say is we have not had a little retreat / meeting for a while, so we would like to get something on the calendar.
I'll send out a doodle tomorrow.
Yeah, we're looking to do it really quickly right after Labor Day.
Okay,
So,
great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Agreed.
And that meeting will be, what are we talking about?
So, we are
It's gonna change
A workshop.
yes, so
Change
we're,
it.
if you have anything that
Are
you
we-
want on the agenda, please send it to myself or
Shopping?
Karen. But one thing I want
Oh,
to
we
talk
off the clock?
about is the new staff reports that you're seeing, why we made the change, and whether you like them or whether if there's changes you'd like to see.
Okay.
I think we want to follow up on the work that Bill has done, so that we can start to use that information as we do our evaluations and stuff, so,
I would like to propose that we have an hour and a half.
Yeah,
yeah, that's great.
We haven't had one in a long time.
about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Well, that's up to you guys, this is my day job.
I mean, if we start at 8:30 and we're done at 10:30, would that be okay?
Yeah, that's
Fridays
On Friday? Yeah.
for me.
Figured out. We're still recording and we go off and.
We don't.
Are we ended?
It's recording.
I got an hour of it. Are we gavelled out?
All right, we're out.
All right.